Hello and welcome back to Crypto Saving Experts, where we talk about the latest cryptocurrency news and take a look at the markets so that we all know exactly what is happening. My name is Jess and we do these live streams every single weekday. Today we have a CME gap that has opened over the weekend, so we need to be talking about that. That is dangerous for the price of Bitcoin, but we have some news here that could be signaling that, wait, maybe we shouldn't be so bearish even though we do have that CME gap. So let's talk about all of this today. First of all, taking a look at the price of Bitcoin, trading at $34,788. It does feel nice to say that. Bitcoin is up 1.3% within the last 24 hours, up 13% within the last week, and you can see there is just a sea of green here on the markets today. Let's take a look at the biggest trending gainers and the trending losers here. So we've got Axie up over 14%, Ravencoin up over 13%, Sand and Solana up over 9% there, so very nice gains there. And in terms of the biggest losers, we're really not seeing much. They've all dropped less than 1% there, so really not something to be concerned about. But big changes happening here, big rewards for us that have held on through this bear market and continue to pay attention. It definitely is nice to see this. Please, before we continue today's stream, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell notification button. We do these live streams every single weekday and you do not want to miss out on these live streams because we really dig in to what's going on in the cryptocurrency markets and prepare for what is going to be the biggest bull market we can hope for. Let's see what's going on in the cryptocurrency news today. The biggest story of the day is BlackRock. Now, as we all know by now, BlackRock have filed for a spot Bitcoin ETF. We have 2 more deadlines by which the SEC need to decide whether they are going to accept, reject, or delay the application. Now, the final deadline is in March, so the SEC have to come to a conclusion on BlackRock's ETF application by then. But we have a deadline before then in January 15th where they need to give some sort of decision by, and it could be to delay at that point in time, but it's still an interesting time. So let's take a look at this and see why BlackRock have been pumping Bitcoin after all. Now, we've seen the price of Bitcoin move to the upside in October. In fact, let me duplicate this and pull this out. Let's get the price of Bitcoin up here too. So BTC USDT. Let me pull all of my indicators off. There you go. You can see here the price of Bitcoin has moved up significantly. If we go to the monthly chart for October, the price of Bitcoin is up a whole, let's get this right, 29%. Now, if that's not what they call October, I don't know what is. Let's pull up the Bitcoin monthly returns. Let's see what that has been in history. We can show here, we're all expecting October to be bullish because in history, Bitcoin has had a bullish October. And again, we are seeing that today, up 28.44% to be exact this month. Hopefully that continues. Quarterly returns for Bitcoin is typically bullish in Q4 as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out for the rest of the year. We are gearing up for that Bitcoin halving at the start of next year. And we are all looking at the potential of these spot Bitcoin ETFs and the impact they can have on the price of Bitcoin. And that is why we are all so excited about the markets right now. And that is the reason Bitcoin is moving to the upside right now. So right now, what we've seen in the price of Bitcoin, if we go to the 4-hour chart, you can see there was a huge pump for the price of Bitcoin when Cointelegraph falsely reported that a spot Bitcoin ETF had been accepted, and this was the pump here. Now, a lot of people were looking at this and saying, it's been confirmed that that news is false. The price should theoretically go back down again, and maybe it should have done. But what we've seen here is a lot of people have seen firsthand what an impact a spot Bitcoin ETF would have on the price of Bitcoin. And a lot of people have looked at that scenario and gone, if that's what happens off fake news, imagine what happens if an ETF actually does get accepted. And they've decided they want to get their hands in the pie. They want to be involved in this and they want to front run the acceptance of a spot Bitcoin ETF. So even though that story was fake, it's created a huge amount of excitement around the spot Bitcoin ETFs. On the back of that, we've also seen the courts tell the SEC they need to re-review Grayscale's application after the SEC rejected their application. They had a whole lawsuit and the SEC lost that lawsuit. So now the SEC are re-reviewing Grayscale's spot Bitcoin ETF application, and they have between 8 and 10 other spot Bitcoin ETF applications there in front of the commission, and they need to decide what they're going to do with this. If they do not have a reasonable moral ground to reject these applications. They have to accept them. So big changes could be coming here. Now, again, the importance of a spot Bitcoin ETF and the reason as to why it is so bullish for the price of Bitcoin is because if there's a spot Bitcoin ETF, it's essentially a stock that's pegged to the price of Bitcoin. Instead of people having to learn about centralized exchanges, about self-custody, and learning how to get exposure to the cryptocurrency space, they can get exposure to the industry just like they can any other stock. An ETF is a publicly traded asset that you can buy and sell just like you can buy any other ETF. You've got gold ETFs, you've got silver ETFs, we've got Bitcoin futures ETFs. In fact, we just want to see that spot Bitcoin ETF go live. It means we can see a huge wave of adoption because people can get access to it more easily, and more people may just decide, you know what, I'm going to allocate a small percentage of my portfolio to Bitcoin, ring up the financial advisor, they do it, and that's it. It's not, okay, I want to get exposure to this, I need to learn how to sign up to a centralized exchange, I need to find which ones I can trust, I need to know which ones I need to KYC to, which ones I need to do AML checks for, I need to learn how to do self-custody. None of that. It's literally as simple as investing in any other ETF, and that's why we could be seeing a huge wave of adoption if these spot Bitcoin ETFs get accepted, and why we are also excited and bullish off this news. Now let's take a look at the story here and see why we are suspecting right now that BlackRock are actually buying Bitcoin. So please don't forget, before we continue, to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button. We are currently on 7 likes, but we've got 14 concurrent viewers, so please make sure to hit that button before we continue with today's stream. What's happening here is BlackRock could seed spot Bitcoin ETF by the end of October, according to some filings. So the asset manager is expected to contribute an unknown amount of funding to the ETF. Now, essentially what this means is they were buying an amount of Bitcoin to start the fund. So the filings suggest that BlackRock intends to contribute seed funding at an unspecified date in October. He further explained the ETF seeding occurs when an entity purchases a limited amount of creation units in exchange for ETF shares. Now, this is creating a very bullish sentiment in the markets right now. If BlackRock is starting to purchase Bitcoin, let's take a look here. The purchase, if it does indeed take place before the end of the month, implies that BlackRock expects to launch the fund reasonably soon. So it's definitely very, very bullish and very, very exciting, but we have not seen the spot Bitcoin ETF get accepted yet, and that is something we need to be aware about. Things like this and news stories like this make us all so much more bullish, because if BlackRock are expecting to get it accepted, they know what they're talking about. If they're funding this thing ready for it to go live, they're really looking to push this over the line as soon as possible. However, all of these news stories make me a little bit more fearful, because it means if we don't get the acceptance, if we do get a harsh rejection, we are going to come down crashing down that 10 times more than we would have been if BlackRock weren't buying, because we would then have the fears of BlackRock selling all of the Bitcoin that they've just purchased. So we need to be aware of that. There's big wins to stories like this, but there is also some concerns that gather around stories like this. So be prepared for that. Let's take a look at the rest of this article though. So BlackRock has not publicly confirmed that any such purchase is complete or underway. Furthermore, the company's filing does not specify a price or exact date. Instead, it seems to use placeholder fields for that information. As such, it seems that the filing could be updated to reflect a later date in the future. So let's keep a close eye on this one. It's definitely an interesting one. BlackRock's offering is highly anticipated. We've seen a lot of excitement around the spot Bitcoin ETFs. I don't need to tell you that. You can see that with the price of Bitcoin. We are looking at a CME gap later in today's stream, so make sure to stay tuned for that. We will analyze the price of Bitcoin. But first of all, we've got some more concerning stories to address here. First of all, a preview of the Fed's interest rate decision on the 1st of November. So we are going to see changes this Wednesday at 6 p.m. UTC time, with a press conference following at 6:30 p.m. UTC time, and we're going to hear what's happening with interest rates. Now, we all know interest rates heavily impact the price of Bitcoin in the short term. In the mid to long term, I would say that the price of Bitcoin has got pretty used to these events and tends to just have a huge amount of volatility in the 1-minute chart and then go back to the price it was at before. But we do need to be aware of these things. It can liquidate a lot of people when these rates come out differently to anticipated. But let's talk about this, talk about the effect interest rates have on Bitcoin and what it means. So What's happened since everything that happened in 2019, 2020, 2021 is the inflation rates have increased massively. Now, when the inflation rates are increasing, the Fed look at this and they say, we need to decrease inflation somehow. And how are we going to do that? And they look at the interest rates, and that is their tool to change the inflation rates. So what they can do is they can increase interest rates. Now, if interest rates are increasing, it means that we are paying more interest on our loans, on our mortgages, on everything possible. When we take out a loan or we are borrowing funds, we are paying higher interest rates. That means less people want to be loaning money at that point in time. And it means if less people are loaning money, less people are spending money, because people have less liquid cash to be spending here, there, and everywhere. And in that scenario, the economy starts to shrink again and the inflation rate declines. Now, that all seems beneficial in some kind of way. Obviously, it's unfortunate for us to have high interest rates, but that does have an impact on the inflation data. The problems we see here is obviously if people have less liquid cash, if people are spending less money, they're not investing in the stock market, in risky assets like cryptocurrency. So that's the problems that we see here in the markets now. So when the interest rates are increasing, the price of Bitcoin, it should typically have a negative effect, or the entire stock market typically has a negative effect, I should say. But when interest rates start to come down again, or we see a pause in the interest rate hikes, that's a positive things for the markets. So let's take a look at what's expected. So the rate at the time of writing, the leading consensus for the Fed decision is to remain at current rate levels with a 99.4% probability of a no change decision. The other scenario accounted for is a reduction of interest rates by 25 basis points with a 0.6% probability. Thus far, the market is not pricing in a rate increase by the Fed. So typically what we see here is what's expected here is typically priced in before the actual announcement takes place. So right now, because we're not expecting any changes, if an interest rate increase does occur, that may shock the market slightly. We may see a little bit of a pullback. If we see a reduction in those interest rates, we could see a move to the upside. And if we stay the same, we'll probably see that volatility, as I said, and then end up in the same sort of price range that we were in prior to the announcement. But I'm sure we can do a live stream at that point in time and watch what happens there in the markets. It will very much be an interesting one there. It always is with the interest rates. So let's take a look at what's happened with inflation, because this gives a good indication of what's happening with the interest rates. September's CPI was released on the 12th of October and came in at 3.7%, a mere 0.1% above forecast. Inflation is settling below 4%, with the past 4 CPI releases under the 4% mark. The next CPI release comes on the 14th of November after the Fed's meeting. However, despite inflation cooling off below 4%, it still has room to go lower before reaching the Fed's 2% target. So the Fed have had a goal for months and months and months now that inflation in the US is going to get down to 2%. Now, yes, we may be slightly below 4%, but to get down another to 2% is really challenging. Back in July 2021, we saw inflation at 9.1% year on year. Now, that was very terrible. That is incredibly high, and it's really impressive that we've managed to get that down to 4% so far. But getting from 4% to 2% is still a hell of a climb that we need to be facing here. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be pretty. And this general economic data that is fearing a lot of people in the markets is definitely something that we need to be aware of. A lot of people in cryptocurrency research cryptocurrency all day and all night, but don't look at what's going on in the general economy and the impact that could have on the markets as well. So we do need to be aware of that. The other thing to be aware of is sometimes bad things in the general economy can push the price of Bitcoin to the upside. We did see banks crashing at the start of this year, and that had a very positive impact on the price of Bitcoin. So those are things to be aware of. It's definitely worthwhile researching and investigating and just spending time educating yourself about the general economy as well as the cryptocurrency space, because I know a lot of people find it very easy in crypto just to focus on what's going on in crypto and not look anywhere else, because there's so much going on in crypto anyway. As if you've got enough on your plate, make sure to do some research on what's going on in the economy as well. It is very interesting. Let's take a look at the next one here. The UK needs a digital pound by the end of the decade, according to the Bank of England Deputy Governor. So the Bank of England Deputy Governor believes that a decision needs to be made soon to launch a digital pound, as the use of physical cash has been on the decline. A digital pound is needed by the end of the decade, according to the Deputy Governor. And the US Fed continues to study the costs and benefits of the digital dollar. This isn't something that's just happening in the UK. UK, we're seeing this worldwide. CBDCs have contributed to the transition of almost cashless society globally, and we are seeing changes occurring across the world. Definitely something we want to be keeping our eye on. We're not going to go into the CBDC debate today. It is a big one. Central bank digital currencies could change the way that we all live. We could have limitations on our currency. Some people believe there could be so many changes with a CBDC. Yes, right now it just sounds like it's not really going to change anything. We all bank on our phones anyway. But there are some limitations that can be put into place if we have CBDCs instead of cash. So we won't go into that debate today, but definitely something to research if you've not researched that previously. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button before we move on to the next story. If you are a Solana fan here, you're going to like this one, so make sure to like today's video. Solana could rise to $3,211 by 2030 in a bullish scenario. Solana's could hit $3,211 if its network can achieve Ethereum-like dominance in users, developers, and decentralized applications. Now, there's a big debate here. Many different cryptocurrencies have come along over the years and said, we're going to be the Ethereum killer. We're going to come over and we're going to take over the adoption that Ethereum has had. We're going to knock that off the top step. I personally don't think that is possible at this point in time. People that don't know much about cryptocurrency know about Bitcoin, know about Ethereum. I don't think either of those two can be replaced as the leading cryptocurrencies. I may be wrong in that decision, but I just don't see it happening. The amount of adoption we've seen for Ethereum over the years and the amount of time that it's had to prove itself to be the leading decentralized application platform really puts it ahead of the crowd, despite it having high transaction fees and maybe slower transaction speeds than other networks. It has that name and it has that long-standing reputation, and that is something I don't think can be replaced by a new project that may be better in terms of scalability, in terms of transaction fees, in terms of transaction speeds. All interesting debates here though, and that does not mean that Solana can't reach Ethereum's current situation. We could see a huge wave of adoption in the next bull market of cryptocurrency, and with that, say Ethereum's here and Solana's here, we may see a whole shift to the upside where Solana reaches where Ethereum is now, but Ethereum even climbs even higher. So that's what I'd be expecting here. We could be seeing big changes. This is a really bullish price prediction for Solana. You all know by now, I'm a little bit cautious on the price of Solana and bullish price predictions because FTX hold a huge amount of Solana. We could be seeing some dumping. That doesn't speak for the long-term possibilities of Solana. However, we did see some pretty problematic things happen with Solana towards the end of 2021, 2022. Some things changed. We did see in the last bull market, Solana was the leading cryptocurrency. Typically, I do believe there will be new cryptocurrencies that haven't even launched yet that drive the next bull market and will leave some of these altcoins from the previous bull cycle behind. So that's a really common trap to fall into by looking at what performed well in the last bull market. You can't just invest in those coins and expect them to do the exact same. These coins did so well in the last bull market because they came out of nowhere and surprised us all with the potential that they had. And that will happen again. New coins will come and surprise us all with what the potential is for those projects. And those are the projects that see the most gains and create the most excitement. Yes, these older projects may do well. And yes, it's brilliant to have those long-standing projects. We don't want a new cycle and new projects every single time because that just shows that we don't have any longevity with these projects. But we do want to see some change, and we may not see these super bullish price predictions that we are seeing right now. But it's nice to see the bullish predictions are back and we're not all just being super duper bearish. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button. We've got 3 stories left for today's stream. Then we're going to analyze the price of Bitcoin. We'll look at the CME gap as well. I am going to tell the team, I've got a team meeting in just a second. I'm going to tell the team I am going to be late because we've got to finish the live stream first. Let me send that message here quickly. While I do, please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button so you don't miss the latest cryptocurrency news. What we've got here on a stream will be late. There we go. What we've got here is Australian authorities raid crypto exchange used to launder roughly $230 million in illicit funds. So Long River taught its criminal customers how to falsify business paperwork like invoices and bank statements in case certain transfers caught the attention of authorities. So let's move on to the next story here. I will drop the link to this in today's chat if you are interested. But let's move on. We've got big stories here. here today. Gemini sues Genesis for 62 million GBTC shares worth $1.6 billion to satisfy customer claims. So Gemini learned that Genesis had received the transfer but refused to surrender the shares to earn units. The Winklevoss twins owned cryptocurrency exchange Gemini has filed a lawsuit against the bankrupt crypto lender Genesis Global Capital, seeking to secure more than 62 million shares of GBTC. So let's explain what's happened here really quickly, a rundown. DCG is the parent company of Genesis. Now, Gemini is the cryptocurrency exchange owned by the Winklevoss twins. And on the Gemini cryptocurrency exchange, you could earn interest on your tokens by staking them on the platform. Now, the way in which Gemini were earning that interest to pay to its users was they were taking user funds and loaning it to Genesis. And Genesis were then paying Gemini that interest on that loan every single month, and therefore giving Gemini the funds to give to their users. And that's all perfectly legal and perfectly fine until Genesis filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And then it wasn't so fine because they had borrowed money off Gemini, and Gemini needed those funds back to give to their users that were staking in the platform. The shares in question were pledged to secure all the loans made by 232,000 Gemini users. They are currently worth $1.6 billion and could completely satisfy the claims of every earn user. But according to the courts here, Genesis have failed to deliver the shares as promised and have taken steps to hinder and delay Gemini earn users' recovery of their digital assets. Obviously, Gemini want to give their users their funds back as soon as possible. They don't want to have built this negative reputation there. People have deposited their funds into Gemini. If they want to be withdrawing them, Gemini want to facilitate that as quick as possible. These are the risks that come with using interest services on centralized exchanges, though we all know that, we are all aware of that. Gemini is still a fully functioning centralized exchange. The only issue is they had a loan given to Gemini, and Gemini loaned some money to Genesis, and Genesis filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So there's just a small delay there in that one sector of the centralized exchange, but other than that, it's all running as it should, I believe. Let's take a look at the next article here. One last article today. Bitcoin open interest highest since June 2022. So Bitcoin's open interest in futures contracts has reached its highest level in over a year. CoinGlass Bitcoin open interest for futures contracts has reached over $15 billion, a figure last witnessed in June 2022. So you can see, we don't even need to say it right now, the excitement is back on the cryptocurrency space. Let's take a look at the CME gap here. Let's go through the worries first before we look at all the positives that we can see in the markets right now. We have created a CME gap, as you can see on the daily chart here. We did have a gap here at $34,165. We did come down and mostly close that today, but we didn't quite finish that off. On the daily chart, though, the wicks do overlap, so I'd say that's all right. It could be better, but the wicks do overlap there, so maybe we don't have a gap there. You can see here we definitely had a gap here. On the daily chart, though, not so much. Let's take a look at the price of Bitcoin here. On the daily chart, you can see it's just being green lines to the upside every single day. We did have that small pullback on Thursday and Friday last week, but overall over the weekend it's been pretty positive. We've seen pretty big fluctuations in the price of Bitcoin today, but overall pretty nice. If we take a look at the daily chart, this is going to be best. You can see here we've broken through some major levels of resistance within the last couple of weeks. In fact, let's go to the weekly chart. We can see lots of benefits here. I have been calling for some pullbacks to use some previous levels of resistance as support, but as time goes on, we are in a point in time right now where we may not get that luxury. It is a luxury to see a confirmation bounce of previous levels of resistance. Right now, if we saw a pullback and a retest that $32,000 level in the long term, that would be super bullish. That would be a really positive thing for the price of Bitcoin. But will that happen? Will Bitcoin treat us to that little pullback, that opportunity to invest at a little bit of a lower price and give us that confirmation bounce to give us confidence that if we do see a turn to the downside in the near future, we have some levels to keep an eye on? That is what we are looking at right now. Today's candle is very, very close to being bullish or bearish. It's at that crossover right now, flicking between the two. In terms of major levels of support and resistance that we are looking at right now, I am looking at that $32,000 level, and I'm looking at that $36,000 level. Both have acted as a level of support. This has acted as a level of resistance before. This one's acted as a level of support before, and we want to retest those, see if we can break through that upper one. And I do believe it would be nice if we could see a retest of that lower one as well. I'd love the opportunity to invest a little bit more because there's never enough Bitcoin in your portfolio. It's always the case. Let's take a look at the daily chart here quickly. Let's take a look at some levels of support and resistance. In fact, we can take these candles all the way across here, and we could be looking at a massive wedge here. Now, this has a level of resistance at $37,000, a level of support at $27,000. Huge wedge there to keep an eye on. We were seeing a huge amount of people calling for lower prices because of the amount of tops that we've seen here. We were looking at this point here, we were looking at a head and shoulders pattern, was not confirmed. We've seen loads of different patterns being formed, and Bitcoin has just moved to the upside because of those spot Bitcoin ETFs. I think we really need to be focusing on the news right now, and that is why we are doing these daily live streams, talking about what's going on in the news, because the news is really dictating what's happening to the price of Bitcoin right now. But that is all we have for today's stream, so thank you very much for tuning in. As always, I hope you have enjoyed. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, and tune back in with us tomorrow. I will see you all then. Thank you very much for watching, and